People in hell are waiting for the great white throne judgment. Where are they till then? Doesn't it say at the end of time about the great white throne judgment that the ones not in the book of life will be cast in hell? Where are they till then? That's a very sobering question.
You know, it is sobering. It's a common question that we get because oftentimes in English, we take the word hell and we run with it. And when we tell someone or we think about somebody going to hell, automatically they think in terms of fire. And that's fine, but it's not, it lacks specificity. And so when you think about theology, we don't base our theology on English. We base it on really the Greek New Testament. And what we see in Luke chapter 16, 19 through 31, Jesus is he's telling this narrative. I believe it's not a parable because parables generally don't have names, and this one has names in it. And so he's telling a narrative of about, that we know the story, the rich man and Lazarus. And so the rich man dies. It says he goes into Hades. So that's important. Hades is a very important word. He goes into Hades and he's in torment. And as the parable goes on, or the story goes on, not a parable, the story goes on, then Lazarus dies. And Lazarus goes to a place described as Abraham's bosom. And it says there's some discussion that had happened between the two compartments, if you wanted to say it that way. And we're going to put a little graphic up on the screen here that I think will help illustrate what is being described in Luke 16. And so you have these two compartments at the time, that Hades was divided into a place of torment. And as Jesus tells the story, there's a great chasm separating the two. And on the other side was a place of comfort. Abraham says that to this gentleman, to the rich man, says, hey, you're tormented in the flame, but we're over here and we can't cross from there and you can't cross over here, but Lazarus is now comforted over here. So scholars will recognize that these two compartments, one is, they're both Hades. One could be called the torment side and the other could be called the Abraham's bosom side or the paradise side. That's an important thing as well, because Jesus says later that he is going to be, in Matthew 12, verse 40, he's talking about the resurrection, and the Pharisees were asking for a sign, and he says, hey, no sign's going to be given to you except the sign of the prophet Jonah. Just as Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be in the belly or the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. So we have this idea as well that, we'll talk about that in the next question, more specifically, but in Greek, you have the idea of Hades and you have the idea of Gehenna. Gehenna is a word that is used to speak about really the lake of fire, the eternal fire in Revelation chapter 20 and Matthew 25, verse 41 and 46. You have those passages there. Think of it this way. She asked the question, where are they now? When someone dies right now, or even at the time of Jesus, as an unbeliever, they go, as Luke 16 tells us, they go directly into Hades, this place of torment. Think of it like a holding cell. Think of it like county jail. You know, you go to county jail, you're waiting there temporarily for your arraignment. Your arraignment, you come, you get either you get judged, or at your final sentencing, you're there in county jail or whatever. Then when you come to your sentencing, it's over, it's done, and now you're sentenced to prison, which is, maybe it's a life imprisonment or whatever. Maybe it's many lives. So think of it that way, that Hades in the New Testament would be considered county jail. It's a temporary place until your final sentencing. She brings up, rightly, Revelation chapter 20, where it's the great white throne judgment. There's no believers at the great white throne judgment. This isn't a matter of determining whether they're saved or not saved. That's determined upon death. We know that from Hebrews 9:27. But when you get to there at the great white throne, Jesus raises all of the unbelievers that have been hanging out, not together, this isn't party time, they've been in their cells in Hades. He raises them up from the dead and they come to stand before him. The books are open, and at that moment, the book of life is opened and they're not found there, which if they were, they wouldn't be here anyway. But then the other books are opened in order to provide testimony for them to receive their sentence, which is a justified sentence because ultimately they have rejected God. And for some people, they've rejected the gospel and the free gift of salvation in Jesus. So at that time, they are then sentenced to Gehenna, which is the lake of fire, which is sobering, it's permanent. That's why we're here to share the gospel, to make sure that people understand that we don't want anybody to go there. And so if we think about it in those terms, that's why even in Revelation 20, it talks about Hades and death being thrown into the lake of fire. This local compartment is no longer needed, and it's thrown into the lake of fire. And so the other, we'll talk about that in the next question. So I think this is a good setup for the next question.
Jackie from Facebook asks, how come Jesus told the thief on the cross, "You will be with me in paradise," but Jesus didn't go to paradise that day? Like you said, he was in the belly for 3 days?
Yes. So this is a great question because, what happened to Jesus during the 3 days? I mean, he does say to the thief on the cross, "You will be with me today in paradise." And so the thief on the cross who had faith, it was very minimal faith. All he said was, "Remember me," but isn't that great that we're saved even by a mustard seed? And so in that regard, Jesus dies and he goes, as he said in Matthew 12:40, he went into the heart of the earth. He didn't ascend into heaven. He says that he had not ascended to the Father. He tells that to Mary in John 20:21, "I have not yet ascended to the Father." And so his spirit, he dies, his body goes in the tomb, his spirit goes down into the heart of the earth, which we would is Hades. Hades in general, remember, Hades is not necessarily bad only. Hades just means the place of the underworld or the place of the dead. It's where spirits go. Again, they go as Luke 16. If you're a rejecter of God, you go to the place of torment. If you're a believer, like the rich man, he goes to Abraham's bosom. The thief goes to Abraham's bosom. Jesus, I would imagine, as he said, in the heart of the earth, goes to Abraham's bosom. So there he is, which is also known as paradise, this place of comfort. Additionally, we know from 1 Peter 3, really 20 and 21, there's this interesting phrase that Peter brings up about Jesus going and proclaiming. Some versions will say preached. Caruso is the word. It doesn't necessarily need to be preached like preached as a gospel. It's this idea of proclaiming. So in 1 Peter 3, it says, Jesus went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. What did he proclaim? And we don't want to get into all the theology there, but it's fascinating that you have this long war against God, including all the angelic realm. And we know from 2 Peter 2:4 that you have angels, the fallen angels that sinned in the time of Noah with human women. Jude 6 as well. And they got cast down to what Peter says in 2 Peter 2:4, Tartarus, which just happens to be the lowest place of Hades, a place of terrible torment and darkness and chains. And so if we wrap this up, when Jesus dies, he does go to paradise, but he takes a trip. He takes a trip down to Tartarus, if we compare 2 Peter 2:4 and 1 Peter 3:20, to proclaim his victory over these fallen angelic host that sought to rebel and to thwart God's plan. It's pretty fascinating too, because in Colossians 2 verse 15, it says that Jesus publicly triumphed over the forces of darkness on the cross. And he triumphed over them and disarmed them and put them to public shame, which is pretty amazing, because if you look at 1 Corinthians 2:7 and 8, it says something similar, that if the forces or the rulers of this world had known, they would have never killed him. But when they killed him, they sealed their own fate. And so we have this, again, very enigmatic phrase in 1 Peter 3:20, that Jesus is down here for 3 days. He's not, as some theologies say, that he's not in hell getting punished and getting beat up by Satan. I mean, that is just heresy. Jesus said in John 19:30 that it is finished. The payment was made, tetelestai, the debt has been paid. So he's down there hanging out with the thief in paradise. He's hanging out with Abraham. He went and took a visit to proclaim his victory over the false angelic evil realm that were in prison. And it says they were in prison and that they were in chains. And then we know 3 days later, he's resurrected. He returns, he gets a glorified body. He's on earth for 40 days until he ascends, and then he ascends to his Father. So that's really the answer, is he did go, and he was there, and his promise to the thief was fulfilled.
As is every other promise that
Yes.
he's ever made.